Hello, namaste, greetings from South Africa. I've been here a few days visiting a couple local friends, and prior I was in Uganda for around a little less than 3 weeks, with a handful of days in Nairobi, Kenya. I went out there. A friend that I had met when I was living in Arizona, I was looking to get involved a little bit. One thing that I've found over my life is that if there's a extended period of time where I'm not doing some sort of service, some sort of sharing my time with others, that's time that's not just focused on myself, then I just feel it. And so a few years ago I was feeling it, and so I was looking to get involved in something and got connected with some refugee things in Arizona. I've always felt a connection and something for people who are in refugee situations, especially, I say especially these days, these are the only days I've been in, but it really just boggles my mind to see people who are the most vulnerable in the most challenging situations I can basically imagine, having to choose to leave the home of their birth, where all of their friends and family are, and all of their connections and all of their belongings and all of their memories, leave it often with very little of those belongings, and come to another country very often through very difficult situations where they don't know anyone, they may not speak the language, they probably don't speak the language, which I can tell you, being in another country for an extended amount of time where you don't speak the language is very challenging. They may look different, and now in this current environment for years, they're treated as bad people and put in camps that are like inhumane for years even. We have people growing up their whole lives in refugee camps, and the countries complaining about them and building walls to stop them. And so thankfully, where I was in Arizona, they actually, the US does not, compared to other countries and compared to its size, it doesn't take in lots of refugees at all. But it does take in some, and I'm grateful for that, and they are as well. You can compare, how many Syrian refugees does Turkey have in it right now? Several million, which is several million more than we take in. But yeah, I got connected with a man. He was a Congolese refugee, and he, around 15 some years ago, but even before he came to the US as a refugee, he had different homes that he had set up to help other refugees, generally children, young people. So he'd been inviting me to come out, and I have been saying, no, I'm not going to. I have this plan of what I'm going to do. I'm going to be with my family, and I'm going to do this stuff. And I said, why am I being so rigid? Let me look at it, let me check in, which is how I like to make decisions now, based off of, does this feel aligned deep inside, and is this going in a similar direction that I'm heading? And it was. So I came out here, and it's been fantastic, really excellent to be. I was in the US for around 2.5 months after those 15 months in India, and it was good to be there. We have such great nature. It's so accessible, it's so clean, quiet, and it's good to be with family. But it was definitely good to get to Africa. I've not been to sub-Saharan Africa before, and it was great. It's good to be back in a country like that. Life is just different. Values are different. There's not, especially right now with COVID and things, there's not this, they're in challenging situations, Uganda and India and Kenya. I mean, these places that I've been, which are a large population of the world, the majority of the countries don't have things like work from home. They have things like work every day in order to buy the food that you're going to eat. And so when there are lockdowns, like in Uganda, I got there near the end of a 6-week lockdown. And I hadn't thought about it, but I met a man on the plane, and then subsequently from that point on, everyone that I talked to, I would ask about it. Like, do you know anyone who has starved to death from this lockdown? Because for 6 weeks, if you're not working, how do you get food? And every person that I asked said yes. They knew multiple people who had starved. And not just starvation, but just the stress. Where I was staying, the woman was working the front desk, a sweet lady that I became friends with, but because of, again, lockdowns and just borders being closed and people fearing to travel and things, there's just not the business that there is normally, and so they don't hire or maintain the other workers. So she's been working at the desk where she sleeps 24 hours a day, 7 days a week since November. She has not had a day off of working 24 hours a day, sleeping at where she works. And that's not an uncommon thing, People are really experiencing challenge, and I maintain many contacts with so many people in India, and it's the same thing. Their borders are still closed for foreigners, and hundreds of millions of people rely on foreign income, and so people are really experiencing challenge, and I really feel for them. And at the same time, as intense as their situation is, I have not, besides the first maybe 2 months, maybe 1 month, when I was in India when COVID first began, where there was so much fear and no one knew what was going on, and we thought the world was going to explode. I haven't, besides that was March, April of 2020. Besides then, I can't think of any person that I have met who has been extremely strong emotionally about COVID or vaccinations, or especially about what other people are choosing to do with their lives. That's just not the energy. We've got people who are literally starving to death, but they're not choosing to go and get aggressive and fight with others about it. And I really appreciate being in cultures that live like that versus the other ways. So it's been quite nice. Yeah, it's been quite nice. And it's interesting. As I'm at these different places, COVID has not, I'm fortunate that I have chosen, and I've been in places, and I've chosen not to have COVID be a big part of my life. My sister had COVID, my mother had COVID, my grandmother, 97-year-old grandmother, had COVID, so I'm familiar with it in my family. And then I do know some people who have lost friends and family to it. I'm certainly not saying that it's not a real thing. I'm not saying that people have not gotten very sick. I have several friends who've gotten very sick and subsequent secondary, more challenging issues due to the extreme antibiotics and things like that. And I'm certainly not saying that people have not lost their lives, and I feel love and compassion for them, but I'm grateful that for me, I don't give it a lot of my mental bandwidth. As similar, I've got great examples of being with these people in these cultures where they don't do it either. The other day I was staying at a place, right now I'm in South Africa, like I said, and they're a bit more intense currently, as they have been experiencing some COVID numbers rising and whatnot. But I woke up and I walked out and I went outside, and then I saw someone with a mask, and oh yeah, COVID is on. And I also traveled over 9,000 miles around the U.S. in this past 2 months, on a road trip. I've been in 6 or 7 different countries, including 15 months in India, all around the U.S., multiple countries in Africa. And I do ask people what their experience is on the ground, because I'm really interested in that. I haven't followed the news. I think summer or autumn of 2018 was when I deleted the news app, and I haven't intentionally looked at the news since, besides maybe a dozen times about different things. So I'm not following the news on COVID. I can tell you that it's not the same in these countries as it is in the US. If you turn on the TV, you don't see it just being blasted all the time. You don't see these COVID numbers going all the time. But I do definitely ask people on the ground what their experience is, because I'm curious. I'm especially curious about how COVID itself is impacting people versus the preventative measures or things like that. And it's challenging to see how so many people are really impacted day to day by what seems to me it seems like we're at a place where it's now just being exaggerated and fear pushed so strongly. Again, not saying that many people have not died, but that we're just making the situation worse by all of the focus that we're putting on it, and by choosing to stop living life and say that this is the priority of our lives right now. And something very common for people in the West and in the US is for us to imagine that everyone else's experience is the same, that we are the leaders of the free world, quote unquote, or we're ahead in technology, we're most advanced, quote unquote, with allopathic medicine, and we believe that's the answer or whatever. But if we look at the numbers in other countries, even India, which has a population of 4 times more than the US in a land mass 1/3 the size, so it's a lot more condensed. I don't remember, we've got Delhi with over 20 million people. We've got Mumbai, which is like 13 to 15. Kolkata is like 13 to 15. And then we've got other cities with high numbers of millions. So it's not like there's not a lot of people there together, and they're definitely not as separated or as in a sterile environment as the US. And they have a lot of reported deaths, but even after those several months of massive amounts of cases per day, they still have 200,000 deaths less than the US. And in Uganda, their reported deaths are 2,200. Kenya's around 4,400. And they're countries with 40 million people, or something like that, so if you calculate that up to the population of the US, they would have around 30,000 deaths. There's many countries where the situation has been different than it has been in the US, in the UK, in the more Western, more commercial countries. And so I don't think that we can paint everything with a broad brush. There's so much pressure right now in the US, and I imagine in other Western countries, about the vaccine and it being the solution, and I don't feel strongly about the vaccine either way. If you desire to take the vaccine, by all means do it, and if you don't, then don't. I don't really feel strongly one way or another, but I don't feel that it's the only solution, or that it's going to, bring the world back to this normal place that we were before, which, by the way, if you look at it, wasn't very great. So we're given an opportunity here to create a new world, not just physically, but with our thinking and the way we handle challenges and each other. And right now, I don't think we're doing that great. in the West, because it's a lot of pressure and it's a lot of labeling, and anti-vax, vax, or liberals all get the vaccine and conservatives all don't, or whatever. And it's like, what's the really, like, we're just going to do this again? Like, we haven't learned from before that division and blaming others and attacking others for their own way of thinking and choices is not the answer. It doesn't seem like we're doing that great of a job with this test, which is not a test about like physical survival. It's a test about how we handle these things. It's always how it is, I can't control the outer world. There's been floods, there's been storms, there's been plagues throughout history, there's been wars, there's been whatever. I can't control them, but I can control how I respond to it and how I interact with others. And it doesn't seem like that's going that great in the West. And from the little that I see, a lot of that seems to be coming from the groups that generally consider themselves to be conscious, or consider themselves to be more, caring about the world or whatever. But what I hear and see is just a lot more pressure and finger pointing and saying you're bad. And I think there's a lot more opportunity out there, for us to just live our life, live our truth, and continue practicing letting others be who they are. So remembering that it's not the same situation all over the world, and maybe even asking the question, why is it that the U.S. has so many more cases than a place like Uganda, where they have, a lot of people living on top of each other and much more social interaction in these countries than in the United States, There's not like all the fences and walls and everything around and individual homes and things like that. So I think there's many reasons, and you guys probably know more than me about them. Clearly, some of them stem from the disease and unhealth of our population in the U.S. as far as obesity, diabetes, different sorts of health issues that have been endemic for a while. And with that, there's also the type of food that we're eating, less fresh food. People in these countries are eating much more fresh food, but they're also eating more local food, and they're also following more traditional things, eating foods that have been known for long time to be beneficial for the immune system. And they're not yet so allopathic Western medicine focused as to believe that their only way of survival in life is by taking medicines that were created by humans who were attempting to copy natural plants where they originally got the idea of the medicines from. This is where a large amount of our medicine comes from. Medicine hunters in the Amazon and all these different countries, they find natural medicines, natural plants that have these properties, and then attempt to make medicines from them that can then be patented and sold. So we're in a place right now where we have been so conditioned to believe that we can only get health from these medications, and we see where the result is. We now have a society that is incredibly unhealthy and that is incredibly mentally disempowered to believe that it needs these things in order to be healthy. So we had how many months from when we knew that COVID was occurring as a big deal until the vaccine came out, like near a year or something like that. And of that time, how much was our government and the people really putting in serious effort to raise their immune system, to get in shape, to learn what foods have natural antiviral benefits, to get a lot of vitamin D, to get outdoors, to change the way that they're thinking, to not be focused on stress and anxiety, which is demonstrated clearly in many tests to show that the immune system lowers, to get good sleep, which has been shown to be one of the biggest individual factors of the immune system of anything, is getting good, regular, healthy sleep. How many people were focusing on that versus how many people are so mentally disempowered that they were thinking, I can't wait until the vaccine comes out because that's the only way we're going to get through this, So I've experienced, I have friends in India who are Ayurvedic doctors, which is their old traditional medicine, which has been practiced for thousands of years and is incredibly efficacious. And they, have their medicines that are freshly made from natural plants and things that they feel very confident provide great benefit, but they are not allowed by their local government to do any studies on them. They were told flat out, we will not be doing that for COVID, even though they have been treating people, and themselves and their families all had COVID and were treated with it. And they've had their Facebook videos taken down, Similarly, in Uganda, there is a professor, a doctor, who believed in certain natural remedies to assist with COVID and was not allowed to be on any social networks, or all of the things were taken down until ultimately the president said we have to find something local that we can do because we're not able to get these Western things. And once he gave his backing for the research, then now he's allowed to speak, but if that hadn't happened, he wouldn't be allowed to. And I was in Kenya and I was talking with local people, and they were saying in their village, they don't know of anyone who's had any sort of serious issue with COVID. They use their natural medicines. But I said, do you guys sell them or, give them to others? They said, no way. We don't do that because we know that the government will come down on us. We're not allowed to. And, this is not, in my opinion, due to that's those other countries. There's just a lot of factors at play here, and there's a ton of money, and there's basically one message being sent right now, and it's being done in a way that I don't agree with. It's very pressured. It's trying to manipulate people. There's lotteries in the US and I think in some other countries where if you get a vaccine and you're put into a lottery for potential to win $1 million or something, it's like, what? That doesn't seem right to me. I mean, that raises red flags if we're trying to manipulate and get people to do something for their benefit by putting a financial, thing in front of them. So, yeah, just some of my thoughts. Personally, I've chosen not to get the vaccine. I continue taking it as seriously as I think that it deserves, every morning, and I eat fresh ginger and fresh turmeric, which has been shown. They both have antiviral and all kinds of benefits and raise the immune system. I take some nutritional yeast, some spirulina and chlorella, strong antioxidants. I dry fast regularly. I'm doing that now, which has been shown. There's not as much information in the West on dry fasting yet, but you've probably heard, fasting has gotten so hot these days as Western science and medicine is beginning to catch up with some of the benefits of it, and it's beginning to be more widely recognized. And dry fasting, which is no food or water, that has even stronger benefits for the immune system, just through the roof, and for just putting the body in prime, healthy, peak position, cleansing out the organs, shrinking the organs, releasing the fat adipose tissue that's got a lot of the toxins and heavy metals and things, and just all these things that there's small little bits that impact our immune system. Good sleep, really. I mean, if you want to have your mind blown about sleep, read the book Why We Sleep. Its impact on the immune system and on the health in general is it's huge. The studies of professional athletes and their likelihood of getting injuries if they get 6 hours of sleep, 7 hours, 8 hours, I mean, it's crazy. And not just the amount of sleep, but the regularity and the quality. No lights, no noises. I wear earplugs and an eye mask. I have worn those for years, doing that sort of thing, just keeping myself physically and mentally healthy. And then the most important one that I think is stress, which means not external things causing me stress, but me choosing how I respond to external things and choosing how much time and energy I give to them, choosing whether or not I feel stress about these things. And I currently work to really limit the things in my life, thinking about things that I can't really impact, or that are out of my control, or that just have a lot of negative energy around them. I don't get involved in these sorts of debates and conversations. I'm comfortable letting you live your life. Like, that's just how I feel. For the vaccine, I'm not against vaccines. I've had, I don't know how many, but it's like 11 pages from the military with vaccines and things like that. Honestly, it's not something that I've thought that much about. The COVID vaccine specifically, I may in the future get the vaccine, which is the more that's been done, the way that we have historically done vaccines. The new ones with the mRNA, I'm not that comfortable with. From the little that I looked into it, the first clinical trials of any mRNA vaccine has been less than a year. But even without that, I don't feel comfortable in where we are in science or medicine to believe that we know best how to do something which impacts my DNA and RNA, even if we think that it only does this sort of thing. It's not so long ago, and even still a good amount of the genetic community considers parts of our DNA, they call it junk DNA, because they didn't think that it had any use. They weren't able to identify its purpose, and so they just call it, there's this junk DNA. It's the majority of our DNA. That is such classic example of, in my opinion, how a lot of our Western science and medicine is, where we know what we're talking about. We're at the pinnacle, and so we can just write everything else off because we already know everything. And then we find out later, oops, we didn't actually know that. So I'm not comfortable with, and I don't feel the need to do things that directly impact my DNA and RNA. We do know through the study of epigenetics, EPI genetics, that our human organism is able and capable and does, on a continuous basis, adjust our DNA, raise and lower, and do all kinds of things that impact all different parts of our body in ways that we didn't think were possible before. So we know that that is possible, and we know that that comes a lot through the way that we are responding to the environment, through our mood, through our stress, through our positivity, through these sorts of things. So I just continue to go about that in that way, my friends. And I think that's about it. I'm sure there's other things, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of emotions. There's a lot of fear, and it's understandable. Like I said, do what you feel is best. It's understandable. For most people, they've not faced something where death was really at their face, where there is really like, I actually have to look at this reality that at some point in my life I'm going to die, and that could be soon. And at some point in my life, every person that I know and every person I've ever met is going to be dead. They're all going to be dead. Most people don't want to face that reality, and so we fill our time with as many different distractions as possible, including arguing with other people about their decisions. And so this has brought that to light, and most people don't have practices of equanimity, of being able to face these realities without being overpowered and controlled by fear and anger and other emotions. And so it's understandable that these things are occurring as they are now. But just because it's understandable doesn't mean that it needs to be or that it's ideal. There's definitely other ways that we can do it. We can do it, in my opinion, by continuing to practice love for ourselves and others, by continuing to intentionally go about learning how to evolve ourselves so that we're not controlled by emotions of any sort, and we instead have space where we can just take some time, check in what really feels fitting right now, what really feels appropriate, and then we move in that direction. And as we do that, we provide space for others to do that, and then, my friend, things change in ways we can't imagine, because the world is not linear. The world is not linear, and we've been taught that it's linear, and we're in a society that's very linear, and we base so many things off of metrics and this is how it's supposed to go. The world is not linear. Massive things happen in very unexpected ways, and so if we continue going on the path of love and grace and acceptance, then all of a sudden we start seeing not just our own lives changing, but the relationships around us. Even when we weren't directly involved with them, we provide them this space, we provide them this example, we provide them this opportunity, and things change, and all of a sudden it's not so scary, it's not so hopeless, there's not so much fear and anxiety and anger. There's a lot more peace. Namaste. Love you.